we're checking that right now.
Okay. We're checking it now.
We're checking it right now. Okay, we're good.
Okay.
I'm there. The meeting of the Texas State Technological College Board of Regents is called to order on this Thursday, August the 9th, 2018 at 10:30 a.m. The next item on the agenda is the invocation.
John.
Let's pray. Lord God, thank you so much for the opportunity to lead the institution, to get to come together and focus on our mission and purpose. Lord, I pray for an extra measure of wisdom as we go about doing business at the college today. And Lord, we pray for the safety of those coming here as they travel back to their homes when we conclude. Lord, it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jonathan. We should determine a quorum.
Evan Vanessa present. Curtis Cleveland present.
Tony Abad, present.
Ellis Skinner present.
Keith Honey, present.
John Ashell present. We do have a quorum. Each of you have had a copy of the agenda. Is there any amendments to the agenda by the Regents? Hearing none, I will call for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So, second.
Motion. Oh, I need a vote. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of the motion?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry. Got busy reading the script. Okay, the next agenda item for approval will be the minutes of the May 9th and 10th meeting. You've had the minutes before you. If you had an opportunity to read them, do you have any corrections or deletions to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Carries. Okay, now we need to approve the minutes of June the 4th Executive Committee. You've had the minutes before you. Are there any corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, do we have any special guests to be recognized? We have none. Okay, now we'll have the Chancellor's comments.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I have some brief comments for you today regarding some recent highlights and also the survey of employee engagement, which we do on an annual basis. My comments today will center primarily on WIG 1 and WIG 3. On a regular basis, the coordinating board, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, invites the CEO of various colleges or systems to come and just give them an update on how things are going. TSTC's turn in this process occurred last month. And so I came and testified. I was scheduled to testify for about 15 minutes, and they kept me there for a good 45 because virtually all the members of the co-board are brand new compared to the last time I was there, and they were intrigued by the unique nature of TSTC. So I had a significant amount of questions that they were very interested in hearing the answer to. So it was a really gratifying kind of opportunity to evangelize TSTC's unique nature to the co-board, the board itself, and not merely the staff. I was so blown away by the comments made by the commissioner that I wanted to show these to you.
Next item on the agenda is Commissioner's remarks. Commissioner, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I will keep my comments brief. We have a very full agenda. It's one of the fullest I've seen in several years. Following me, you're going to hear a presentation by Chancellor Michael Reeser of the Texas State Technical College System. I think we tend to overlook sometimes that this is one of the most innovative higher education systems in the country. And you'll hear about how the funding system has really had a tremendous impact on the quality and the focus of the institution. And I think it's a model that should be emulated all over the country.
So there were two wonderful parts of that. One was his acknowledgement of our characteristics and how they're really future focused and worthy of emulation. But the other was also to admit that oftentimes TSTC gets overlooked because we're the 7th system, but we're not a university. And we're not a community college either, and we sometimes get overlooked because we're the odd duck in the mix, if you will. But then to have him go on and say all of those things about us, and I won't drag you through the comments because they were so long, but I will say many of the members were talking about why don't all of higher ed behave like you guys? That was a central theme of the questions. And if you ever want to see it, you can root it out on the co-board website and watch the whole thing. So I wanted to give you that as a TSTC proud moment. Here's another one. Back in May, I got a call from the governor's office saying the White House wants us to send a delegation to brief them on STEM education and counsel with them on what it is that needs to happen. Each state gets 3 members, and we want to know if you'll go. And I said, well, okay, I'll bet I could fit that in my calendar. And a kind of a cool part was, I said, who else is going? And they said, we don't know, you're the first guy we called. So TSTC was first on the list, and eventually we found out who it was. But in June, late June, our delegation left and went to the White House and spent 2 days. We met with the National Science Foundation, with all of the players in STEM. And Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Ed, was there, and the Chief of NASA was there, and the Chief of the Smithsonian was there, and National Science Boss, and all of that. And they sat and listened to us talk about various topics that would inform the next round of STEM strategies at the federal level. The Texas, not surprisingly, the general Texas tone was, just give us the money and we'll do what's right. Now, I know you find that hard to believe here in Texas, but that's what we told the Fed. So I thought I'd show you, this is the delegation. Ruth Hughes is the lady on my right. She's now the chairman of the Texas Workforce Commission and has served on the commission as a commissioner for several years now. She's an attorney by training and a public servant for a long time, great long career. And then on the right is just had a name blank, Farley, Angela Farley, who is a CPA by training, but she's the chief operating officer of the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. So Angela was there representing industry, I was there representing education, and Ruth was there for workforce training. And so we were at the White House. This is a shot of us outside the West Wing. That's the West Wing, and they took a picture of the whole contingency. And you can see the White House north door there in the background. The president wasn't there, so he sent his daughter, who addressed us in the opening keynote for the whole conference. This was the only time we actually got talked to. The rest of the time, we did the talking and they did the listening. And interestingly, if you get a cupcake at the White House, it has a presidential seal in it. So you should be really proud that TSTC was selected to go do this. It was an honor to be there, and it was an opportunity. We know they heard us because we've already begun to see some of the feedback dribble back out of DC, and many of the things we talked about were things were things that are now we're beginning to hear back. And so that's another TSTC proud moment that I wanted you to see. Okay. You know that we do the survey of employee engagement every year. And for the new members, I'll let you know, this is an instrument developed by the Graduate School of Education at UT Austin. It has been normed across the country, and it's an instrument used by colleges, thousands of colleges across America. And so it's, Maddie right now is passing you out a hard copy. We just got this Friday. So we haven't had a chance to actually dive in to all the numbers and all the information and really know what it is. And we'll talk more about it at the November meeting. But since we just received it, I wanted to give it to you, and then I wanted to call your attention to some highlights in it. The first is our overall score. Our overall score was 372 last time, and it's 378 this time. What the testers say is if you move 6 points, that's a statistically meaningful movement. And so we're moving in the right direction in a statistically meaningful way. It's the smallest statistically meaningful, but we are moving. I'll also point out that the way this is normed is if you have a score of 300 or less, that's what they call an area of concern. And if you have a score of 400 or higher, then you are considered very good. So our overall score approaches 400, and so I think TSTC is generally in good category, but it's a mixed bucket, and I'll show you that. The next item in the executive summary is our response rate was 84%. Now remember, the very first time we took this survey 3 years ago, it was 60, and we were told by UT, holy cow, you got more than 50% on your first round. That's amazing. And they point that out because what they say is that by itself is an indication that your employees are engaged in the workplace. Last year we had roughly 71, 72, something like that. This year we have 83. So this is a really nice trend and a really good indication that the employees believe this instrument is something that they can speak through. And so you can read the rest of that here. Here's how they break down the employee engagement tranches. You have highly engaged, engaged, and those are the two ideal categories. You have moderately engaged, and then you have disengaged. Now, if you've been in business for a long time, you know you always have a few of these. What I want to show you, though, is I want to take these numbers and compare them to the national norm. So here's engaged and highly engaged grouped together, and what you can see is we have over 50% of our employees in the highly engaged or engaged category, and the national norm is 30. So these other two categories are the ones where you'd love to move folks over to there, and you can see we're already far better than the national norm in both of these. And this is a particularly important one. Because these often disengaged employees are the ones that aren't just unengaged with what they do every day, but they'll often have a toxic effect on those around them. So that's your summary right there of the engaged conclusions. The systems are broken down into 12 what they call constructs. And many of the constructs are made up of a bunch of different questions that they combine into a thematic score. So, in terms of, these are the constructs, and what they tell us is, remember, 400 and above is considered a very good score. So, we have many we have a 400 here, we're nearly 400 here, we're 400 here, we're nearly 400 here, we're very close to 400 here, and so forth on down. So overall, we have a lot of really good scores. The 3 lagging scores are still right at 350, which is midpoint, and then information systems at 375. Pay is an interesting construct, and as you read the report, you'll find there are no colleges that do well in pay. They just aren't, and you'll see that in there. So here's the other thing that I think is really important is these are the absolute scores, but here's our movement since last year. Keep in mind 6 points is considered statistically important movement. So we had better than 6 points here, 6 points here, better than 6 points here, and internal communication, which you remember was a problem for us. So we're getting better, and we're headed in the right direction here. Here's another 6. Here's an amazing one. This is because of HR's progress they've made in doing a better job of professional development throughout the company. And then here's another 6 down here. So in the notion of WIG 3 about becoming a better place to work, what I would say is we still have mixed results. There are some places that are really bright and some that aren't, but it continues to provide us with a roadmap on how to go forward and continue progressing in this area. So here's the time frame that'll happen on this report. We're providing it to you now because it just hit our office, and we want you to have a chance to, it's pretty voluminous, and if you want a chance to read the whole thing by the next meeting, we wanted to give it to you now so you could. We have to absorb what it says, so we'll spend the rest of that month doing that with HR and others, and we're reporting that to you. Next month, what we will do, and this has become our practice too, is we will mail the thing to all the employees. We want them to see what they said. But we want to be able to understand what it says before we do that. So we'll send that out next month. Then for the rest of the fall, we'll meet in some informal groups with employees and stuff and do some qualitative unpacking. We'll ask them, what does this say to you? And how do you see this? Some focus group type activities. Because here's a quantitative representation of where we are. We need some qualitative feedback in order to really understand it. One of the things I really want to spend some time on with them is this pay thing. And so then once we get that, during our planning season, which occurs in the spring of the year, we'll take what we've learned to incorporate it into whatever remedial planning things we need to do or enhance strategies or whatever to continue to move forward in our cultural efforts. And then in late spring, we'll do the survey again, and the whole cycle continues again. And so this will be the annual rhythm we started a couple years ago and will continue. You will always see this information, because WIG 3 is based in large part on our ability to continue to move our culture here. And as a board level goal, this will be something you'll always be a part of. So that is my update. More to come in November.
Questions?
Was I too fast?
That's about right. Mr. Chancellor, I want to congratulate you on representing us so well in Austin and Washington. It's a real plus for the school.
Thank you.
You do it very, very well.
It's an honor to do that.
Okay, this gets us to the part of the meeting where we talk about committees. And we'll start out with the Committee for Student Learning and Student Development. And Regent Abad, please, that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regents, this morning we had a great time discussing the students learning and all the preparation that goes into that, with a lot of that being in the upcoming reaffirmation in the fall of 2019. There's a lot of great things coming that Jeff, Jen, and Kyle are about to endeavor, and I appreciate their hard work. Pretty soon I asked them, when we'd be able to get a good a report on that, because they're going to start going throughout the state and implementing their changes and the tweaking of the system. So hopefully in the second quarter of next year or so we'll get to start to hear that report. But along with that, you'll see in the student learning tab, you'll have 52 honor graduates that the TSTC systems has, and we need to recognize those and appreciate the names being added to the book so that we have record of them. But along with that, I hope that in the future maybe we could recognize them individually, them and their families, that graduation day, have something there. I'm not too sure what, but it would be great because they need to recognize that they are TSTC. They earned their 4.0. We need to give them the honor, and their families. It takes a lot of work. I don't know about you, but I wasn't there. In fact, Jeff showed me the medal and what they wear, and that was the closest I've ever been to one, to one of those medals. But anyhow, we do need to. No, it's right there.
This is close as Tony and I ever got to one.
Yeah. I want to say I'm not worthy. But anyhow, I think as a board, be able to recognize the students for their hard work for that. But also, along with the Regents, I know that some of y'all, I hope most of y'all go to the graduation ceremonies and stand and shake their hands because that means something to them. Some of the families have told me personally that they appreciate that. So hopefully we'll continue to do our part as Regents to congratulate them for their hard work, along with these 52 students that are in the honor graduates. But there are no minute orders in this report. This list, of course, requires no approval or action, but just want to recognize those 52 honor graduates. And that's it.
Thank you very much. And graduation is the 17th, I believe, a week from tomorrow.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next committee, and that's going to be Curtis in the,
Mr. Chairman, our committee was busy this morning, and we have a number of things to share. The next time that we get together as Regents, we're going to have some note cards available and suggested contacts, and we, the Regents, are going to start becoming proactive prior to this next legislative session and touching base with our senators and representatives and maybe some community leaders who have agreed to be advocates for our legislative agenda, and we'll have those prepared and ready at the next meeting we have. Mr. Stuckley is actively working on our partnerships with other SDAs, and the one partnership that seems to be very, very hot in the current market is aviation. And he has several meetings already set up with other community and STA representatives. And he'll be giving us a report on those. And that's an opportunity for us, TSTC, to make some connections into other communities that we're not actively engaged in at this time. The board self-evaluation, which each of us was sent, is now complete. And Mr. Chairman, we did what you told us to do. And Mr. Rushing's going to give us a report on that.
First, I'd like to thank y'all for your zealous participation. As you can see by the composite that I laid at each of your places, all 9 of the regions did respond, which is awesome. As was explained to you, this is one of those requirements. As a state agency, we fall under certain bureaucratic rules that we're obligated to participate in, and this is one of them. But it goes further than that. It's actually a good self-help tool. It's self-identified areas where you may have challenges, or you may wish certain training or other things. As you can tell by the numbers here, y'all have evaluated both the board and the individual participation as being very high. The Chancellor and I have discussed this. We both agreed that those were appropriate numbers. We don't think anybody's delusional. We feel like we're very fortunate to have this board, and we enjoy working with you. We just appreciate that you've done this. Mr. Chairman, we commit this to y'all for your consideration for any actions y'all might have on this matter, and then we'll put it in an appropriate file for documentation.
Thank you, Ray.
Mr. Chairman, there are no minute orders to discuss, and there's no action that needs to be taken today. That concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. On the self-evaluation, probably we just need to make it reflected in the minutes that we did receive this and reviewed it, and no action was taken. Is that? Okay, that's what we're going to do. The next report is going to be on facilities, and Chairman Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, Rick Burr and Ray Freed and myself met, and we had 2 minute orders and 1 report. I'll call on Ray Freed.
Good morning. We've got the 2 minute orders for your approval and also the major projects list that we'll go over. The first minute order is found on page 36. This minute order, number 10-18C, is to accept the replacement of the water and sewage infrastructure at TSTC Waco. The project will be completed this month, and we're happy to report that we're experiencing good results from the water quality that we have achieved, and we're not having to flush water anymore. And the infiltration in the sewer system is much better. Of course, along with that goes less maintenance. So the TSTC administration requests the Board of Regents approve this minute order as written. Are there any questions? Okay, next minute order is found on page 37. Minute order number 11-18C is to accept the Phase 2 renovation of the Engineering Center at TSTC Harlingen. The programs offered in this renovated building will be chemical technology, industrial systems technology, AC/DC circuits analysis, biomedical technology. The project will be complete and ready for us to first day of class on August the 27th of this year, and it's on schedule and in budget. Page 38 and 39 are pictures of the facility. The staircase going up in the kind of the student lounge area is found on page 38, and then the chem lab on page 39. The TSTC administration, yes.
You might tell the new members about the wood
that's shown there.
pieces that are
sure.
in the Harlingen location?
So several years ago, the Harlingen campus deconstructed some of the old military dormitories. And when they did that deconstruction, they salvaged that wood and stored it in the building construction trades building, and have a couple of very skilled craftsmen who repurposed that wood, and we've got it on many of our campuses now. We've got it, and I may not get them all right, but we've got them, of course, in Harlingen, is to use throughout that campus, and PBK, one of our architects, is extremely complimentary of that, and everybody that hears the story behind that is definitely taken by it. In Fort Bend, we opened that new campus, and we've got quite a bit of that wood throughout both buildings, mainly in the Industrial Technology Center, and it's really a beautiful feature. And are there others, Mike? This table. Yes, yes, sir. How would I overlook that?
Yeah.
So, yes, this table was actually built by the group there in Harlingen and sent down here in pieces and put together and assembled. So this is from the barracks and the reclaimed wood. It's certainly meaningful. Those of us that are cost efficient are like, we should just buy it at Home Depot and lie, but we would never do that. Because really a nice feature. And like I say, the architects are really very complimentary of it. Any questions on the minute order?
Did have a question on the building in Harlingen.
Yes.
The drafting design classes that are in those individual are they also going to be relocated to that new building?
The master plan is to make that the engineering building. Okay. So there is a phase 3, and there's about 10,000 square foot available. And again, as we do with every project, we'll look at the viability and what makes the most sense for us as we expand.
So that those programs will all be contained in that one building.
Yeah, that is the development of the master plan as it is today. Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay. TSTC administration requests the Board of Regents authorizes the chancellor or designee to accept this project by approving this minute order written. The major project list. I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you've got questions, you're certainly welcome to ask them. I'll answer them. Project number 1, of course, is the one that we've proposed a minute order for acceptance, and as well as number 2. Number 3, you accepted or authorized us to accept the Abilene project at the last board meeting because we were able to occupy that building a little bit early, and so we moved in it on August the 6th, last Monday as planned. We were able to hold a press conference, VIP session yesterday morning, and then a registration rally there for new students. So we've moved the enrollment center there. We're still working out all the final details in the labs, but they will definitely be ready to open on August the 27th, first day of class. And I believe we've got the open house or ribbon cutting is scheduled for October the 4th. And I just really want to compliment the team that's worked on that because I've been able to work closely with them, but HR and recruiting and everybody has really stepped up and worked hard on that, and we've hired, HR's hired, and faculty have hired all the faculty to man that new building, and 4 of those programs are startup programs. So that makes it extremely difficult to go hire quality faculty, and from what I've seen and the way they have pitched in and helped us with the equipment setting and the organization of that building, we've got a good group there, and so everybody's to be commended on that. The next project is the TSTC monument sign, and I've got a few slides to show you on that. We're making some progress on that now, and as we get more time and get rid of some of these bigger projects, that'll start moving faster. The rework the paving project in Sweetwater, there's an RFP out on that to bid that project now. And then the Sweetwater housing renovation, we've got the RFQ to select the architect to do the design on that out, just being evaluated. So that concludes the oral report, and I've got a couple slides. If you go this is here in Waco, and so you saw the monument on the left in its present condition, as we're stripping off all the old signage and able to reuse that foundation and base, and rendering on the right is what that monument sign is going to look like at the entrance here on your Waco campus. Likewise, this is the monument sign on the new building in Abilene, and the landscaping obviously isn't done around it yet, but that is the statewide monument, and you can see the building there in the background. That is the new Industrial Technology Center in Abilene. This is the enrollment center that we're set up in a kind of an apple bar configuration, where the recruiters and advisors will come out and greet the students. Those are electronic. The elevation or the height of those are adjustable, so it's kind of a cool feature. The furniture supplier furnished the wrong color, so they're letting us continue to use the cherry wood until the slate color comes in, but when it comes in, it'll be much more attractive and match the setting much better.
Is that some of the Harlingen wood of the city?
No. This is the EMS program. They moved their ambulance simulator over from the downtown site and set it up, and there's the chairs and round tables in there, and of course, as soon as they get moved in on the 27th, that'll be full of all kinds of interesting equipment. This is one of the electric power and control labs. We have 2 labs similar to that, set up with trainers. This is one semester of the 3-semester welding programs. So this has got 20 booths in it. There's a total of 60 in the new facility. This is the industrial maintenance lab. So it's very familiar if you've been to Fort Bend. You walk in the main entrance, and it's the first thing you see on the left-hand side, and it's full of impressive equipment. And this is the lounge area. You can see the big window that you saw in the elevation. This is out overlooking Loop 322, which is, highly trafficked. And this is the student lounge area where the students can hang out between classes and study.
Across the loop there, you can see the Abilene Fairgrounds.
Yes.
So, and behind the building is the airport. So this is sandwiched between 2 really high-profile features of the region.
That concludes the report. There's no questions. Thank you.
Will we abandon the old site downtown?
The ultimate goal is to converge all of the Abilene footprint on the new campus. And that's why we got 50 acres, because 50 acres should hold what we perceive to be the long-term thing. Today, we're in the old site. We also have a piece of undeveloped property across the street from that one on Highway 80. And then downtown, we lease the T&P warehouse where our culinary group is. Ultimately, we'd like everything over at the new campus. Also, Abilene ISD is talking to us. They ask us, would you be interested? We're thinking of building a tech high school. Would you be interested in us having our tech high school on your campus? And our answer was, sure, let's talk about that. So that could be a really synergistic situation to have their tech high school on that new campus. And there's plenty of room for all of that. The other building we have, by the way, we have one more, is over on the flight line of the Abilene Airport where our aviation maintenance is. And we're evaluating what our options are in terms of that building too.
Do you recall what the current cost is of one welding booth station?
Of one section?
One station. What does it cost in today's dollars?
I can't come up with that off my head, but I'll get that for you. Yeah.
Be interested to know.
Yeah. The project is $12 million, but on top of that, then we had an equipment budget of nearly $2 million, so, and that would include that welding equipment. So let me put that together for you.
And the community came to the table with $6 million. So there was a generous community support for that building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. That concludes our report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ray, we want to commend you for your work in getting this project completed and getting them checked off. I can remember when, not too long ago, this project list was about 5 pages long.
It's a good team.
The next committee to hear from is going to be audit.
Well, we met earlier, Mr. Chairman, and we had proposed for board for approval of 3-minute orders 24-18C, 12-18C, and 13-18C. And that's all we have right now.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Final committee to report out is Keith Hayes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Physical Affairs Committee met this morning. I met with Jonathan Hoekstra and a number of his staff members. We did review a variety of issues, including 7-minute orders, which Jonathan will review for you here in a moment. In addition to that, we discussed several initiatives that are underway within his department. One of those, which all of these will hear reports on at some point in the future. Bid thresholds, investment report reformatting, budget report reformatting, and a very interesting report on our external employer survey, which is just underway and just got started. And I can tell you that the results are looking very, very good, and I think they'll be very useful for us as we go forward. So I'm very encouraged to hear about that and look forward to that report sometime in the future. Jonathan also will have a number of reports about budget expenditures and encumbrances, the full-time equivalent report as normal, pledge collateral, and the quarterly investment report. So Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll jump right into the first minute order. On page 42 is minute order 14-18C, and this one I'll pause and take a little time to provide some background and make sure that we understand what we're doing. This is a transaction that impacts several institutions. It originated with the startup of the campus at Fort Bend County. The different institutions that are involved in this transaction are TSTC, the TSTC Foundation, 2 foundations down in the Fort Bend area, the George Foundation and the Henderson Westendorf Foundation, and then we have a bank that really led the financing for this, American Bank. And this transaction impacts all of the parties, and so I'd like to inform the boards about how we've engaged them and communicated with them and kind of where we stand with them on this particular transaction. This was the original lease between TSTC and the TSTC Foundation, created as part of the first facility on that campus there. Just a reminder, that first facility was a $26 million facility. We were able to finance that through the TSTC Foundation, with the debt service being guaranteed and paid by the 2 foundations down there, George Foundation, Henderson Westendorf Foundation. On top of that, TSTC itself had a $100,000 per year operating lease that was essentially our part, our skin in the game, but the substantial portion of the debt service was covered by those 2 foundations. To ensure that debt did not get reflected on TSTC's balance sheet, we treated this as an operating lease at that time. And so the terms of a operating lease require a couple things. You cannot transfer the title as a part of that transaction. You can't have a bargain purchase option at the end of it. There are the reasons why the conveyance of that property was not addressed in that initial lease, and that allowed us to really keep this off balance sheet. So the issue of title transfer was not addressed up front, and so it's an issue that during the term we were going to have to resolve at some point. And we suggest that now is the time. The lease accounting rules are changing. That financing would be required to be reflected on our financial statements in near term. And so we have a proposal that would actually resolve the issue of title transfer, create the transfer of funds to the foundation, but would offer the opportunity for TSTC to receive title for that facility at a deep discount to what is the market rate. So what we're proposing is to change TSTC's annual operating lease payment from $100,000 a year to $912,000 a year. That would be effective for the remaining 8 payments. And so that would, the value of those remaining 8 payments would roughly be a 75% discount on the historical cost of that facility. And then at the conclusion of those 8 payments, the state would receive that facility, and conveyance would no longer be ambiguous. It would be certain. We have conducted some analysis of the values of that property. It's a kind of a difficult property to get a valuation for because it's unique. It's not only an education facility, but it's a highly industrial, technical education facility. So there's not a lot of comps for that kind of property. But when we talked to real estate experts down there, they indicated, well, you might look at your replacement value and your insurance. You might look at your historical cost, and those would be sort of your first place to start. And the ultimate transfer of value for that is well below those. We're looking at a $26 million replacement value, and in that range in terms of historical cost. All of this is made possible because of the generosity of those 2 foundations down there, and so we feel like we can demonstrate that this is a good value to state. If you look at the remaining lease payment, it's less than a typical lease payment for similar type facilities that don't have a conveyance in their lease. So this is certainly a best value for the state. And so with that, I'd definitely offer or be open to any questions, but ask approval of the board to approve the amended lease for the TSTC Industrial Technology Center in Fort Bend County.
Jonathan, does the lease have an impact on the foundation revenue that they were expecting from this transaction?
They will receive additional funds than they were previously. So of the $900,000, $100,000 will continue to cover the debt service as it did before, but there will be a $800,000 balance that they will be at their disposal. Okay, the next minute order is on page 45. It's a different type of lease. This is where we're the lessor, and this is the typical type of lease that the board addresses. This is related to property at our campus in Brownwood, and it's a proposal to continue our lease with the Texas Parks and Wildlife there. We actually have 2 leases related to our relationship with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and so they're in sequential order. The first one's for 2,200 square feet in the facility that's adjacent to our campus at $750 a square foot, a bit less than market value, but we actually receive some benefit from having a security presence of Texas Parks and Wildlife on our campus. So it's been a favorable lease for both parties, and we'd like to continue that. So we ask the board's approval for that. The second lease is related to storage space for their boats and et cetera. It's a $180 monthly rental. And we couldn't combine these leases. We actually negotiate one with the Parks and Wildlife, one with the Texas Facilities Commission, and it just wasn't real feasible. So we ask your approval for this $1,800 square feet of storage space to Texas Parks and Wildlife on that same Brownwood campus. Page 51 is minute order 17-18C. It is asking the board's approval for the schedule of tuition and fees effective for the fall of 19 semester. This is a change in our protocol. We typically take tuition and fee actions to the board in February. We're actually moving this up in the cycle, and this will be the new protocol so that we can assist our sales teams, our recruiting teams, as they're creating their recruiting goals for the next year. They'll have these decisions determined in advance of that. They'll really start that process in the next month as they work with the departments and look at what they want to sell for the next year. So this specific tuition and fee schedule is pretty much incremental change from the previous year. It's continuing the same tier structures that we had before, but for the lowest 4 tiers, we're taking a 5% increase in what is the designated tuition portion, resulting in about a 4% increase for each of those total tiers of tuition. And this continues the ongoing dialogue that we began a few years ago with instruction and with the sales and marketing and with the finances. We really evaluated pricing, much of what we got to report on yesterday in terms of the impact in terms of our total revenue mix for the college. And so you see the new rate schedule on page 52 with the increases to the tiers reflected in that second table of information. You see the different tiers of designated tuition. For tier 2, they go from 191 to 200. Tier 3, 172 to 180. That's roughly 5% for each of those categories of tuition. Every year we look at demand, we look at capacity to evaluate which programs are appropriately in which tiers, and that could change from season to season. But again, this is reflecting that model of selling the seats on the airplane. Those that are, fill up fast, we want to address that capacity and demand issue and reflect our prices appropriately. On the following page, there's a few changes to fees. We are very careful not to add fees from year to year. We feel like that's a trend that higher ed has drifted down, and we wanted to move in a different direction. And even with that, we're eliminating a couple fees in this proposal. There's a late graduation fee, a late registration fee. These were some behavioral modification type fees. And frankly, this was not helping our enrollment management processes, and it was not a significant revenue for us. And so we suggest elimination of that. And then there's a diploma reprint fee of $50. That is an imposition of a behavioral management program because we were seeing some abuses there. So. And that's the tuition and fee schedule proposal for fall of 19.
Well, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Chancellor, related to this. When the staff sees a fee increase, does it relate to them in wages? Is there a correlation?
Okay, I've never had that presented to me. But that doesn't mean the thought doesn't occur to people. I just haven't I couldn't answer your question without offering you conjecture.
I'm just wondering, you talked about the one item you're working on.
If I were to be presented with that question about, you're raising your tuition, but, I remain concerned about my pay, what I would point to is the amount of pay increases we have provided and bonuses that we have paid over the past 4 or 5 years. And then I would point to the legislature and show that our funding from the legislature has actually gotten softer. And for us to continue to serve more students like we are, we've got to raise the price to the student because we aren't getting it from Austin. So
there's not a direct correlation if somebody asks the question.
We've never made it.
And it's tied to state funding.
I'm sorry.
It's tied to state funding's gone down, So tuition's gotta go up.
And TSTC, by the way, is one of the slowest in terms of offsetting falling state funding with skyrocketing tuition. The rest of the sector we could call skyrocketing. So, yeah, I've actually not been confronted by anyone about what might appear to be a paradox, but I would be glad to sit and talk about it, though. And that's off the top of my head, that's the answer I would get.
Well, makes sense. Yeah. State revenue's going down, so you gotta make it up.
This is status quo.
That's a general trend across all higher ed sectors over the last 2 decades is appropriation funding per full-time student equivalent has gone down over that period of time. And
It's a national trend. It's not just Texas. The Great Recession, for example, in some of the Rust Belt states, during the teeth of the Great Recession, higher ed funding fell, and this is not exaggeration, 40% in 1 year. And so in places like Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, places like that, there were massive consolidations, layoffs, reductions of services and things like that, because the chocks were just knocked out from under the public institutions up there. Texas didn't have to suffer that, because you know that we were isolated from the recession in a way the Rust Belt wasn't, and but we've still followed the trend. Overall, higher ed funding continues to shrink in Texas like it is everywhere else.
You can tell you're still being sensitive though about the raising rates, because you didn't just do every year 6%, or you're still taking into account the students.
To analyze carefully where it is that it's appropriate to change our prices, yes.
And it's not, it's not just all, we just automatically pass through the difference in whatever it costs us. I mean, we're looking actively at ways to cut our costs as well, right? So it's a little bit of a complicated formula. Where are we reducing costs, where are we adding costs? Adding primarily to offer better programs and more programs that are better for our students, right?
All of that is true. I'll add this one other observation that I think is really important to point out in this conversation, and that is when you look at overall head count as a statewide system, we have either gotten smaller or roughly, or up just slightly. The reason that's important is most of our costs are salaries. They're way more than 50% of our overall cost are in salaries. So, and when you look at the mix of those employees, we have grown faculty significantly faster, and those are the ones who generate our revenues. We've grown faculty significantly faster, and in many cases shrunk the non-teaching personnel. Those non-teaching personnel seldom generate any revenue. And so our mantra going into single accreditation of it's about education and not administration has actually been true. We've shrunk the non-teaching personnel, grown the teaching personnel, and at the same time overall salaries for all categories have gone up. So, yeah, go
Keith,
ahead.
where we're actually trying to head, we're still having to do this kind of in a broad brush at an enterprise level, as we're getting an understanding of what Jonathan referred to as our capacities and our demand. But as we're able to get deeper into the programs themselves through vitality and the new instruments we have, we'll begin to get in a position where we can price differentiate depending upon the program itself. Because every program's got different capacities, different demands, different cost structures. So these are still half steps where we want to get to in programmatic pricing, which we'll present later down the road.
I had a question on the tiers, different tiers. You got 5 different tiers. Pretty sure Tier 1 in Waco's, Tier 1 in Arlington, they all pretty much keep the same tiers?
Today that is true, and so what you would see is culinary is actually the Tier 1 program, and its rate is true for Waco, Williamson County, the Valley, Harlingen, where all of those are located. However, the conditions are different in each location, and so the capacity and the demand at those locations may suggest that we don't exactly take the same price approach. And where that exists, we might look at, well, there's available capacity and not a strong demand in a particular location. We might use an institutional scholarship to help us increase enrollment to get some students to push them over the edge and move them into those programs. So that's more of a discretionary way we approach that, but currently that we are applying them uniformly across the state on the rate table, using some tools to manage that in other ways.
The reason, yes.
Going to your question deeper, we will in the new model that we'll present later on. The regional provost will have the ability to have these types of scholarship funds where they need to apply it on a regional basis in one part of the state where there's not that great of a need or constraint in another part of the state.
Well, the reason I was saying is yesterday's form that Chairman you supplied, is there a way to identify these programs per that, to add these tier designations to the programs here, to get
Identify them on the report? We can do that. They're identified.
I mean, yeah.
Yes, sir.
It'll, at least with me, it'll kind of give me a better idea what's you know,
We'll send you.
definition on
We'll send you that.
Appreciate that.
So, I'll say one other observation. Pricing for, this is you can get a graduate degree in pricing. It is not an easy topic. It has a lot of variables in it. I mean, you have to consider not just your cost, that's the rudimentary stuff, but you have to consider the competitive environment, what the other folks are charging. You have to consider the value of the degree once they get in the workplace. You have to consider all kinds of various factors when it goes into pricing. And we haven't even begun to explore things like bundling, seasonal pricing, because if we go to regional pricing, then there's no argument for not doing seasonal pricing too, because the idea of regional pricing is to address the fact that you have an uneven demand across your system. Well, that's true by location, but it could also be true in time. And what I'm saying there is, if you book a hotel room at a resort in high season, you're going to pay more than if you do in low season. Well, our low season is summer. Could it be that if demand is elastic to pricing, that what we do is we actually provide discounts during the summer to push more through our fixed capital structure that is sitting there gin and air conditioning anyway, but underutilized. And so we've got some really high-end kinds of approaches that we could take that are inspired by industry, who cope with the same issues we do: big capital structures, constraints of facilities and manpower, both regional and time-based variations. All of that goes into pricing, because pricing can drive consumer behavior. And we haven't even started to talk about corporate pricing, where we start to charge for access to the talent. And so this is a topic that at the executive level, we spend a lot of time exploring what are the could-bes and what should we do next. And what Jonathan has shown you here is just the next iteration of what is sure to be in the next 5 to 10 years, a really complex approach. And if you've ever tried to unpack something like airline pricing, you know what we mean by really complex. I'll bet in your steel business you do the same thing. So I'll bet in your business you do the same thing. So
it highlights why we've really pulled the different divisions, finance and instruction and sales and student services together to really manage those resources in a way where the physical constraints aren't the only driver of capacity. We can optimize all of our resources to generate the highest level of throughput for the organization.
And the other thing I'll say about this is I'm not sure you're going to see a bunch of institutions of higher ed follow our lead on this. And here's why. They don't want to deal with the discussion of why is my engineering tuition higher than my sociology tuition? How come so they just use one price for everybody, and they don't have to deal with the notion of relative value. It's a conversation I would hate to watch, unless you like watching car wrecks.
There, a couple more minute orders. The next one on page 54 is minute order 18-18C. It's again related to pricing for the student housing here on the Waco campus. This last year, we looked at how sewage and water was being billed and handled with the housing here on this campus, and we're missing a significant opportunity by bearing those costs institutionally. And so the minute order on page 54 suggests a new fee related to the water, sewage, and trash collection at each location. In some cases, we saw these rates go up by 100% during the course of a year. And, you know, when your sewage goes up, you know, from $13 to $26 on your bill, you may not pay that close of attention. When it happens on 700 units, we start paying close attention. And we felt like this was an opportunity for us to pass through those costs, but also have the residents pay attention to what's happening with the behaviors associated with those as well. So we feel like this is good for the financial stability of the housing operation here, and would ask your approval to add that rate. On page 59 is my last minute order, and it's the first of many. Actually, there's two. I'll mention the second minute order, but go into depth on the 19-18C is on page 59, and it's the first of many that you'll see that are going to be new for the board. Goes back to the Senate Bill 20 discussion we had yesterday, where the new statutes related to purchasing require specific delegation of authority on any contract that has a life value over $1 million. The contract considered on page 59 is one of those, and it relates to the equipment financing for data center equipment that will replace obsolete equipment at TSTC, Waco, and Harlingen. We have our more significant data centers at these two locations, and this would have a broad institutional impact. And there's financing arrangements that are authorized with the Department of Information Resources, but this amount, it requires the board's approval. And so the recommended minute order does contain the specific delegation to the chancellor or his designee to apply for approval from the bond review board, and ultimately to procure this equipment through this type of arrangement. And then page 60 includes that ratification of the executive action authorizing the selection of the outside public accounting firm. That concludes the minute orders. There are several reports. They're all reports that are reported on every quarter. We did have a discussion in our working committee about changing the look and feel and the actual information that the board's getting with some of these. I believe on page 61 through 63, Those three reports will really begin to transform over the next couple meetings. This historically has shown budget, adjusted budget, and our expenditures to date, really showing the rate of spending relative to budget. We feel like we have advanced beyond that. I think a look more like what's in your budget report yesterday that would show what's our predicted spending, predicted revenues, and really give a better sense of where we're at in terms of performance and showing forecasted information would be more useful. Our capabilities have gotten to the point where we feel like we can comfortably provide that to you. But in terms of these reports, we have page 62 really breaks it down by fund group and by the type of spending, where you see the amount of budget remaining with respect to the fiscal year 18 budget. Definitely have sufficient amount of budget remaining as of June 30th, 2018. In fact, yesterday we were able to report we feel like we're going to spend much less than what was actually budgeted across the enterprise this next year. That story is not really told in this information. So while we've spent less than the budget remaining, we feel like, less than the predicted budget, it's going to be a better story than what's even told here on page 62. 63, again, it shows what occurs during the course of the year in terms of adjusting our budget when different changes occur during the course of the year. If there are budget adjustments that are less than the required board approval authority, we have changes during the course of the year. The most significant related to that is in that restricted category of funds. That's where we actually have grants that are approved. We will adjust the budget to allow us to continue on with or authorize that grant and actually fund that grant. So these are relatively minor adjustments to the budget during the course of this year, with the exception of the restricted funds. On pages 64 and 65, we have reports on our full-time equivalent employees. As a reminder, this is the first report on page 64. We have a capped amount of positions that we can pay with appropriated funds. That's what this report shows. Those are called E&G funds in our terminology. And so you can see by location or by bill pattern how we've actually spent those funds and how that equates in terms of the full-time equivalent employees. We're well short of the cap for each institution and on a statewide basis. I think we're 250 FTEs underneath the threshold. And then the following page 65, again, it's a 5-year trend chart of the distribution of how employees are how we fund the compensation for employees, and it shows the trends on a overall basis over that period of time. If you look at the very bottom grand total chart, you see we're still 23 total employees short of where we were 5 years ago, despite the fact that we've added 3 campuses, multiple faculty and support positions in those areas. The last 2 reports that we have relate to pledge collateral and our investment reports. The pledge of collateral relates to our compliance with collateralization of all of our cash positions for the institution. We are sufficiently collateralized as of that reporting date, May 31st. And page 67 details the different types of investments across the organization and their relative interest rates, maturity dates. There's a lot of detail on this report that may or may not be useful to the board. We feel like there's a more condensed way to report this to the board. We observed some of those reports this morning, and I think we'll get to see a more condensed strategic view of how cash is used, what our cash balance is from period to period in the next board meeting. On page 69, you'll see our weighted average rate of interest for the 3 months ended on May 31, 2018 was 1.69%, and we benchmarked that against the Treasury bond yield as of 5/31, the 1 year. I'm sorry, yeah, that's a 1 year weighted average interest of 2.23%. And they worked pretty hard to get that eke out that 1.69% for that period of time. And with that, that concludes my reports.
Any questions for Jonathan? If not, Jonathan, thanks you and your team for a lot of hard work, and this particular meeting is significant in terms of the budget preparation, and y'all did a great job with it, so thanks for all that. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you, Regent Honey. At the close of the meeting yesterday, in the budget session, we tabled 4 minute orders to be moved and voted on under the consent agenda. That was tabled, and I do believe we need a motion to remove those from the table. They're already included in the minute orders. Do I have a motion to remove those 4 from the table? Second. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor indicate aye. Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Are there any amendments to the consent agenda from the Regents? Okay. The consent agenda items are listed in your agenda. If there are no changes, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Gets us to unfinished business. At the last board meeting, we appointed an ad hoc committee to take a look at the bylaws. And Ray Russian, our counselor, was working with that. And Ray, can you give us a report of where we are?
Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of the last meeting, it was the intent to present that the bylaws currently require a 30-day period for the board to review any proposed changes. It was the intent to get that to y'all 30 days prior to this meeting, but there were some logistical issues. You reported an ad hoc committee to do that. That was Regent Honey, Regent Tremont, and Regent Meade. And due to logistical difficulties, we could not get that reviewed with the ad hoc committee in time. So we're going to present some proposed revisions to the committee members for the review and revision. We'll present that to you. You'll have that before the 5th of October. One of the issues that's going to come up is as we've evolved our committees, which are the standing committees are part of y'all's bylaws, and there's at least one standing committee that we need to review for potential reformation or perhaps an addition of another standing committee. And we'll get with both the committee chair, that'd be Curtis Cleveland on that committee, as well as with other leadership teams to see how that's going to work. Those proposed revisions with committees will also be sent to the ad hoc committee for a chance to review those, so we have it on the agenda for the November meeting for the approval of the amended bylaws.
Good. Thank you, sir. Any other thing, unfinished business? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Is there any new business we brought before the board? All right, that gets us to public comments. The process for public comments at the TSTC board meetings are governed by the Texas statutes and the bylaws of the Board of Regents of the TSTC system. Section 551.042 of the Texas Open Meeting Act restricts the TSTC Board of Regents to enter into dialogue in response to any public comments. At this time, are there any public comments? Hearing none, we close that section, public comments. Okay, we have a closed meeting coming up. It is 10 minutes to 12. How long is this closed meeting going to take? Do you have any idea?
10 minutes?
10 minutes? Okay. I would suggest we just go ahead and press on and finish, and then we eat. Is that agreeable?
So moved.
Okay, we got it. Okay. All right, we'll now move to the closed meeting. We ask the public to remain seated. Meeting of the TSTC Board of Regents held in the Conley Meeting and Conference Center in Waco, Texas on Thursday, August the 9th. After properly posting and in accordance with the Chapter 155 of the Texas Government Code for the specific purpose of providing in sections 55107, 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074 for recess from an open meeting to a closed meeting. At this time, the board will move to closed meeting.
Just a drop of water in an endless sea.
Reconvene the open meeting at 12:58. There was no action taken in the open meeting, in the closed session. Okay, we're to the Chancellor's report.
Sir, I offer you a couple dates. Would like to remind you that October 4th will be our ribbon cutting on our brand new building and campus in Abilene. If your schedule permits, this is an allowable Regent travel expense sort of item. If you'd like to come out and see the new building, you will be a VIP at such a ceremony. Just let Maddie or I know that you'd like to go, and we'll help you with any arrangements. Also on November 29th and 30th is this year's annual Coordinating Board Higher Ed Leadership Conference. All regents are required to attend it at least once. Tony, I don't remember, you were there last year, weren't you? And Curtis was too, so all of y'all have been. We'll remind the other regents that aren't here now. Want to say thank you to Maddie Johnston. This was her first board process that she managed, so all your material went through her, and congratulations, Maddie, you made it through your first one. If you ever have any questions about documentation or the flow of things and all that, be sure and give her a call. Thanks to Beth Wooten and her team at the TSTC Foundation for hosting our events this year. Is she out? Okay. Yeah, okay. I got it. And, well then, you can offer the thank you to her husband. Oh, there she is. Yeah. So thanks to Beth and her team, and also to Belle Whedon and her budget team, who put so much heart and soul into the budget they prepared for you yesterday. And then finally, Shelley Sherwitz and her IT team. All of this magic that happens through IT is not really magic at all. It's blood, sweat, and tears. And so we thank her for all of that stuff. And we look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Curtis?
No, sir.
Tony?
No, sir.
Ellis?
None for me, thanks.
All right. The next meeting is scheduled for November the 7th and 8th here at the Waco campus. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned at 12.
You just feel the moonshine, ain't it just like
October 4th.
All right. Good meeting, y'all.
Well,
Thank you very much.
If you want to do an overnight or any of that.
Karen, she's a silver sun. You best walk her away and watch it shining. Watch her